What's up, YouTube? Looks like we're live. So to start today, just gonna go over a few news topics, stuff people sent or that I stumbled across myself that looked interesting. So this first video I want to show YouTuber, this is John Williams. He was mostly primarily a real estate guy. Now he's doing some interesting stuff. I think he has his own private jet, or at least a pilot's license. He's kind of going full prepper. Anyways, he has some pretty spicy and I think informative news coverage. So I often check out what he has to say regarding the metaverse. Here in this title, you could see he has this live stream he did, which is titled Operation Divide and Conquer to the Metaverse. I thought that the English here was pretty advanced. So basically the thesis that he puts forth in this video is that we could see in American culture how we have like sporting events, concerts, a lot of different entertainment venue type stuff have been, for the past few decades at least, one of the central points that have brought people together. I would say especially as by the numbers and stuff, things like church attendance, that sort of stuff, has been on the decline with a lot of people, as well as we've been seeing lots of different people of different groups come into the United States. So mainly I'm thinking about where I'm living, which is California, but if people are from other places, feel free to share your impressions about this. Anyways, that's to say, we have these things like music festivals, Coachella, whatever, sports events, NBA, NFL, whatever it is, college sports as well as a big one, that have been venues which people have come together. So the thesis being put forth in this video is that basically it's becoming much more of a pain to participate in these things. There's a lot of divisiveness going on. So for example, with all the sports stuff, we've seen a lot of the political things entering it, with all the racial, social justice types politics. You could see how the ratings of those things have been affected. And then likewise with all the lockdown measures, with the current health crisis business, a lot of people have been not really wanting to go to these, afraid to go, whatever it is. But normal attendance has changed, and in place what we're seeing in a lot of these sports events is a move towards a lot of these digital or kind of hybrid events. So another interesting example of an innovation in this space that I think Reaper actually showed me is NBA, Top Shot, not Hot Shot. Anyways, with these NBA games, they were creating these NFTs, so the non-fungible digital tokens that are based on the games. So if you could get people participating in person, go into these games, as well as digitally trading these things on some sort of platform, then it's creating this hybrid interest in what was previously an in-person venue through which a lot of people came together. And then think if I search like virtual concert or something, then there's probably a lot of coverage about these recently. Yeah, so here, billboard.com. So the CV ongoing list of virtual concerts. So we could see some popular artists are going to be or have already done all sorts of stuff. So is this okay, so this a lot of these have already happened because this was published towards the beginning of this year. anyways, that's just to say that a lot of people with these entertainment venues have been experimenting or trying to roll out these digital or partly digital events of all sorts. So how that relates to this is there's a lot of these issues that are dividing people and splitting them up. So now it's much more of a pain basically to actually go to these things in person, and people are being actively encouraged to participate digitally because it could be much cheaper, first of all, and then if a lot of the experience is digital anyways, then if you're going to do the thing, maybe you could even more fully participate. Like if you're at your PC where you got your fancy keyboard, you could type faster. I don't know. But yeah, it was just interesting to see this claim how in real life these places where people used to gather, they're split up more now. So now the way that people do come together, it makes more sense in many ways to do it via online channel. And the irony is not lost to me. For example, what I'm trying to do with this channel, for instance, is trying to make a place where, yeah, I look at stuff, I have things to share, so I'll talk about it here, and then, like, I'm aware if I invite people, friends of friends invite people, then we could come and gather in this venue, so to speak, where you could have me talking in the background and reading old French people, and you could say stuff in the chat or the comments or whatever while cooking yourself a burrito. It's all good. So what we'll see is as a lot of the classic normal, let's call them normal physical space ways that people gather are shaken up, slice and dice, and you have people that might even live next to each other or in the same city being really divided over politics and these other issues, then I think there's this natural trend by which people will try to find like-minded people in some sense that they could connect with. And yeah, so whether it will be in one of these paid events like a digital streaming of an NBA event or partly digital something, or even like a YouTube channel, a Twitch stream, whatever it may be, I think that this observation of a divide and conquer and then people going into things that are closer and closer to Zuck fully immersed metaverse. So not quite metaverse yet, but we could see how, even what I'm doing right here, we're kind of already going down that path. So I would say this is about, on a scale of 1 through 10, let's say this is tinfoil about 3 out of 10. Because if you actively believe there's somebody doing, like, planning and intentionally trying to divide and conquer the population, as opposed to just these impersonal forces that are just happening, then that's a little conspiratorial, because you're saying, I think it's somebody's plan to make these things happen. So why do I think that it's not crazy or nutso to have that sort of view, to think that sort of thing? Well, I would say that if we go and we read what some of the powerful people in this world have to say, such as reading the intellectual underpinnings inspiring a lot of the stuff we're seeing, such as Jacques Ellul and the Technological Society, what we could see is a kind of implementation for a blueprint or like a system of some kind is laid out. Like, you have all these people talking about ideas, how you have hyper efficiency through, people specializing, people not even knowing what the person next to them doing, but it's all working in this super, you read stuff like this in science fiction, and if you take it to be kind of prescriptive in a way, and then you see how actively the sorts of technologies, like the one I thought that the name was so revealing, was like this panopticon software, or panopto. It's called panopto, not panopticon, but a clear Fedora Panopto? Yeah. A clear fedora tip to the Panopticon of, I think it was Foucault. Or was it Bentham? One of those guys. Then you see money going to fund projects like this, then you think, is it all just a coincidence? Or are there people that really would like the creation of this sort of system that were quote-unquote warned against through books like 1984, but maybe more so than being like warned against maybe it's more like you're sort of given a taste of what is to come, given like a blueprint, so to speak, and then we could see how ideas that are already laid out actually get implemented in practice. So I say that's tinfoil level 3 out of 10 because, like, personally, I do think that there are like people with big plans that do want to push stuff in certain directions. I mean, that's why you have people writing books and announcing their like visions or dreams for the future. I don't think that like if I was like, yeah, Elon Musk has a plan to send like rockets to space and to transform the world through technology, is that a very crazy thing to say? I would say no, because the dude himself announces these things. Likewise, if you read these crypto people, they got other stuff to say. A Reaper says, so reactionary 5 minutes into the stream. Well, that's because I was talking about this fellow. This is John Williams, who I know you've told me you view as a rather clickbaity fellow. Well, he's able to successfully grow a YouTube channel bigger than me and attract a lot of viewers. So clearly there's something to learn from his clickbaity ways. So I'll end that reactionary bit here. But just to say, we're going to try to push the boundaries a little bit here so that we get exposed to different things that people are saying, because our goal is not to be siloed or put in a bubble, but rather we want to be expansive and see what a lot of different people are saying. All right, cool. So next interesting bit of news that I wanted to cover, I got this article here. It says 50% of Facebook Messenger's total voice traffic comes from Cambodia. Here's why. So this is from this fairly new site. They call themselves Rest of the World. We could see who is making this publication about us. Okay, they're a non-profit journalism org. And looks like they got a lot of New York, Hong Kong, London, Singapore, Mexico. So they got people, Lagos, Nigeria. So they got people all over the world, different ethnicities, and looks like it could be an informative site for learning about stuff that's going on around the world. Anyways, as I mentioned on this channel, one of the things I'm interested in is language and linguistics, especially technology, writing systems, how these things all come together. So I think this was a very pertinent article that was sent to me. Basically, the too long didn't read of this is that a lot of Cambodians don't bother to type because typing in Cambodian is kind of a specialized thing. It's rather hard to learn. So instead, often what people do is they send these text messages. So here, there's a image of like a phone screen. I don't know if this is an actual screenshot, but it shows the general idea. Or you'll have like maybe these sticker emoji things that send, but rather than typing out a message and being able to read off the screen what people are saying, you'll see that they have these voice recordings. So it'll be like, hello, how are you? Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm going to the grocery store. Could you buy this, this, and that? Stuff like that. Oh, we're being joined by George. Hi, George. What's up? Okay, so just looking at this Cambodian thing again. Yeah, so this sort of technology is very interesting. Well, I'll bring up a big word here. So it's kind of, how shall I put this? It's like a conversation in that it is, a back and forth. People are exchanging messages, but it's going to have a temporal lag that, like, if I say something to you and then you don't respond to me right away, if we're talking face to face, then that would be rather strange. But if it takes a while for, like, you to reply to a text message, then that's a little bit different. So this is a kind of strange than in this Cambodian language that goes in between. Oh, and then here we have some examples of how one might write Cambodian. So I'll zoom in a bit, see if it shows. Like here, this would be their native script, which I guess is pretty complex to type. I don't speak this language or write it, so I don't know. And then here would be a Romanized version of it. Now, this whole phenomenon, I hear, is also common with a lot of other languages. For example, the Indic languages like Hindi. So there's this one thing, Google Input Tools. So people like Google have come up with solutions to try to make typing different languages easier. And I think they have, like Android devices, and I believe you could install an extension for your browser. So it's like the technology is here where, let's just say, I want to type in Cambodian. I think they call it Khmer. Yeah. So I don't know how to type in this language, but you could see that they do give you ways to input it. This one... Okay, so they have like a handwriting and a keyboard typing. I wanted to show how, like for a language like Hindi, okay, so like a lot of languages, Chinese is like this. It'll be kind of phonetic. So I'm typing like Latin letters that you could recognize here, and then you could sort of approximately type a word, and you could select the appropriate candidate from the list. So what you would see, like in this Cambodian here, where they would be typing out their language in the Latin alphabet, you could do something like that. But then with these Google tools, then there's a mechanism to Privyet. So to type that, you would have to actually memorize a new keyboard layout. Anyways, sorry for this little, what do you want to call it, tangent going off on here. This is a topic I like very much, so I'm sharing this. But that's to say, languages like Cambodian and stuff, especially if you have a lot of people that are rather new to using computers, then maybe they're not so skilled or familiar with setting up a lot of this technology stuff. So that, can you teach your grandma to type in multiple keyboard layouts? Like maybe some people can. But for a lot of people, maybe it's easier to just show them how to find the record a voice message button. And one thing that's cool about, you could call this a kind of hack or workaround, is that like computer technology, a lot of it was developed by Americans. So you could say that the internet in many ways is English first. Like everything works in English on the internet, and it will work with other languages as well, but it will definitely work with English, and then English will always be fully supported for pretty much anything, any major software I could think of. Whereas if you speak another language, then maybe it's not so supported. Now, on the other hand, when we're talking about speaking speech, then we have a kind of leveling medium, because now it doesn't, like, if we're just using spoken language, it no longer matters, like, oh, is your language supported in Unicode? Something like that doesn't matter whatsoever. And like, can the algorithm recognize if you're all your words? Can you switch languages? Can you do, like, you could do all these things. Like, with speech, everything gets leveled in a way, which is cool. So these crazy Cambodians, they have found a way to use up apparently 50% of Facebook Messenger's total voice traffic. So in terms of bandwidth and stuff, that's actually probably quite a lot. When you send like a text message, that's a lot less data than sending a voice message. So Cambodia, not a nation that you hear very much about in the world, I would say overall. They are making Facebook sweat by giving them 50% of their voice traffic. So cool for the Cambodians. It seems like how they're using the technology is working out for them. Will they learn to type Cambodian or to write it better? I don't know. Not my concern to worry about, but interesting to see how they have found a way to use oral communication with the tool, like talking on the phone, as opposed to using the like type and say stuff on your phone way of communicating. Oh, another sociological thing that was brought up in this article was that I think it said like people aren't shy about just talking to their phone in public. So I think a lot of Americans, if you're like ordering a pizza or something with voice commands on your phone, you might feel a little bit awkward doing that. Apparently, Cambodian people just talking in their phones, this is all just normal business as usual stuff. So another sociological thing too. I've noticed this as well with Chinese people, overseas Chinese people near a university I was at. So if anybody else has any comments about this, feel free to share about how that works for you. Comment by George. He says, if you go too long talking about tech without soy facing, the algo drops your stream. Right, better do a soy face. Voice tech. Wah! Okay, that hopefully that keeps the stream going for a little bit longer. Okay, cool. So we talked about voice messaging over Facebook and Cambodians. That's cool. All right. I think these other topics I will leave for a different day. TV tropes. Let's skip to Jacques Ellul. Unless anybody else has something else to add, I think that was enough of periphery matters for now. Could return to the text, and if anything else comes up, we could talk about that. And slowly, I've also been looking at our list of future topics that we've been accumulating. So I'm not going to be reading Technological Society forever. There is other stuff here that I've been logging to look up. So this is on the queue. And also, too, I think this plan of just going through like a main text, like Technological Society, and then tying in these other topics as is fit, that's actually been kind of cool because it is all coming together. So if nobody complains about the current way that things are doing and the viewer count is remaining the same or going up, not tanking to zero, then I'll assume that whatever I'm doing is working. So do please give me some feedback, because this stream, I do it because like I have stuff I think about and I want to say, and if other people find it useful, then that gives me encouragement to keep on doing it, because if truly it doesn't matter if I'm doing it, then I should like rake leaves or just do some work that somebody else wants me to do. But I try to do this because I think that if I could do some sort of work or produce something that I'm uniquely positioned to do, as opposed to just something that anybody could do, then, maybe I'm at least making some use of my education and like the training that I have given myself and that I've received. So that's why I do this. All right, enough existential crisis. Let us continue with the text. So we're entering into this section of the Jacques Ellul book titled The Industrial Revolution. Very spicy. I would say that from my own experience coming up through school, kind of we learned about like the American Revolution, and then very briefly, like I took a class AP World History where we just did a blast through all the civilizations and talked about Sumerians, Egyptians, ancient China, like quite quick though. You can't spend too much time in just one course talking about any one civilization. The majority of the stuff, especially by the time people get to university, if they go that far, I think is dealing with the Industrial Revolution and post-Industrial Revolution. There's a kind of there's an acceptance. We're surrounded by all sorts of machines, so we're in the modern world, and we might even say that we're in the make up a new moniker. We're in the digital age, something like that. So there's, I think, a widespread understanding that starting in the Industrial Revolution type period, where you start to see big mechanized factories and stuff everywhere, that stuff has gotten everywhere. We have some big words being dropped here. I see now these messages were they not popping up before? Reaper drops the word asynchronous. I think that was when I was talking about how you have communication where you have one person, they send something, and then you wait some time, and then some person sends another. I didn't say that term asynchronous right away because I was thinking like they do become serialized. So it is asynchronous, but then also the way that it's presented on the screen, it's also synchronous in a way. So like my brain was going in circles. I couldn't figure out like, oh, should I say it's asynchronous or not? That's a appropriate term though to bring up. Cool. Okay, so I'll continue with the Industrial Revolution topic here. So Jacques Ellul says the term Industrial Revolution is applied exclusively to the development of machinery. But that is to see only one side of it. In actual fact, the Industrial Revolution was merely one aspect of the technical revolution. It is preposterous that a specialist such as Lewis Mumford could write that he has found the various modes of exploiting energy the key to the evolution of technique and the moving force behind its transformations. In his view, the first period, which lasted until about 1750, knew only hydraulic energy. A second period, from 1715 to 1880, is the age of coal, and a third that of electricity. The use of nuclear energy has only recently appeared. It is perhaps to be reckoned as part of the age of electricity. Okay, so just like how I said digital age, then you could see here Jacques Ellul's giving some names for some other ages, like age of electricity, just big technological milestones that have transformed how a lot of stuff has looked. And I'll just give like a 30-second summary for those who might be watching this particular stream for the first time. So this whole book, Jacques Ellul, The Technological Society, he's basically analyzing the development of the world, the society. So this book's written in the mid-20th century, 1954. He published it in French, translated to English in 1964. And the author, Jacques Ellul, a French guy, is describing how society has evolved to be characterized by this broad thing he calls technique. So technique isn't specifically just technology, but rather it's like, you could call it business or process science, something like that, where it wouldn't just be like machines allow people to do work more efficiently. Think too about like how is a corporation organized, so breaking people up into different departments and stuff. You could call that like a management technique. And likewise, you could see how governments, finance, all this stuff is organized. So we have this just application of this very broad idea that is called technique here. And this book is giving an analysis about how the development of technique has shaped society. So now he's giving us his lightning fast toward their history, and we're at the Industrial Revolution. So that's my quick summary for those who are just joining. Feel free to correct that or add anything. Anybody who has been watching this or has read this text before, you could be the guy that says actually and corrects me on that. I have no problem, and it will probably enrich our experience here. Okay. So, okay, and another thing too I've been trying to do, like going through the stream, is occasionally you'll get like the author just saying, and then this person said this and this and this and this, responding to his contemporaries, but we don't really know or care what his contemporaries said unless it seems really important. I'm kind of skipping over it. So here, for example, it's like this Mumford guy, he's talking about stuff with some terms, and Jacques Ellul has some other terms, so I'm just skipping over stuff like that I don't think anybody here would care about too much. Okay, so let's skip to this more interesting line. The revolution, so is this technical revolution in machinery, I think. Okay, something like that. Entailed the exertion and the regrouping of all the national energies. There were to be no more loafers. Under the French Revolution, they were imprisoned. No more privileged persons, no special interests. Everyone must serve in accordance with the strictures of technique. Okay, so we can see how this is kind of interesting too. Talking about class organization, how society is ordered has changed. So probably if you've gotten a very typical American history, then it might have been like, okay, well, America's cool because we have freedom here. Because before there was like slave owners and serfdom and all these bad things. And yeah, they were like these slave drivers. They would just lounge around in their plantations all day. And a lot of them were good for nothings. They didn't do anything. And yeah, there would be like noblemen and kings. And then they just oppressed all the serfs. So a sort of articulation of history in a, I would say, kind of pro-labor sort of way. I think that's quite common to hear. And of course, not entirely false. There's a lot of legitimate descriptive points made with that sort of historical account. But you could also say, to what ends are these accounts being given, and what sort of narrative do they have to serve? So here we could see that you might look at certain previous forms of organization and say, like, for example, a lot of people would talk about like corruption in the church, right? And say like, oh yeah, the church was scooping up all these lands instead of allowing it to be economically productive or allow for the prosperity of the people. Then it was rich people would hold it all to themselves, and so on. So this technological society, what might be some ways in which you could sell it to people? How could it appeal to people? Well, you could say, look, there's all these people that are, they have the big houses, they're doing all this stuff, but like they're privileged persons, they're special interests. Let's look up this word loafer. I don't think I've ever used this word myself, so I'm interested to see what exactly it means. All right, I don't think it's a shoe. Let's see. An idle person. Bum, bumpkin, footler, idler, lout, yobo. Maybe that's related to hobo. And then we have all these related words. So maybe it's like wolf, because wolves kind of wander around. Something like that. Anyways, this is to say, in the technological society, you don't get to be a loafer. Like, no more wandering around. For you can't sleep in your car. You got to get into your cubicle, buddy. Bucko. Clean your room, bucko. All right, we have a couple comments. What's up, Darklands? Good to see you. George says, interesting that ages are defined in terms of technique we gained instead of technique we lost. Yeah, so interesting big brain period, big brain point by George. We could look at how we do this, like periodization. So, for example, could you talk about these different periods in terms of what was lost? Like the like what if we talked about called a period like the forgetting of God, a period, right? You could think of other phrases or other terms in which you call various periods that we had, or like, for example, we could call the digital age the let's call it the information idolatry age. Oh man, we're gonna become pro journalists here. Different terms for ages. We live in the information idolatry age, where we believe that information is everything because pirating movies is a crime. That's as opposed to like the information age or the digital age, looking like positively we gained all this stuff through ones and zeros. Also too, right, we could look at the current age or the industrial age, maybe the taking children from the parents and splitting up of the family and putting people under horrendous conditions age. Yeah, maybe we need to have like a leftist on this stream to come on and tell us about like Charles Dickens and how stuff was bad. I'm by no means very knowledgeable on the specifics of those subjects, but if you just look at the general descriptions of what early industrial, like Victorian England or something was like, then surely you'll run across some pretty dismal, grim descriptions. Okay, let's continue this text. From the judicial point of view, the technical revolution entailed a great systemization of law in the Napoleonic codes and the definitive suppression of spontaneous sources of law, for example, custom. Interesting. It involved the unification of legal institutions under the iron rule of the state and the submission of law to policy. And throughout Europe, except in Great Britain, the nations, amazed by such efficient operation, abandoned their traditional judicial systems in favor of the state. So this is kind of relating to what I've been saying about like algorithms, whether it's the YouTube, Google algorithms, and calling these things a sort of digital governance. So what do you have when you have a sort of automatic filtering or censorship sort of thing, which is one of the goals of doing something like implementing an algorithm, whether it's something is as innocuous as a spam filter, or whether it's active suppression of a particular political point or something. The same basic technology is going into that. You could look at that as a next step in a systematization of law, right? So in the digital world, we're seeing that today, but we could look back and we could see how there's a precedent for doing that. So maybe rather than local judges, kings and stuff, if you have these more, I don't want to even say rigorously, but let's just say more extensive legal codes and stuff defined, as opposed to, if you steal this, right? But instead you have all these categorizations of different crimes and things like that, such that it's necessary to have like more and more people that are professionals in law and law enforcement. Then, right, that's one consequence of how implementing these policies will transform society. All right, continuing. This systematization, unification, and clarification was applied to everything. It resulted not only in the establishment of budgetary rules and in financial organization, but in the systematization of weights and measures and the planning of roads. All this represented technique at work. From this point of view, it might be said that technique is the translation into action of man's concern to master things by means of reason, to account for what is subconscious, make quantitative what is qualitative, make clear and precise the outlines of nature, take hold of chaos and put order into it. Okay, here I think this paragraph is pretty dense, said a lot. So this idea of weights and measures and the planning of roads, I'm sure you all have heard of like Roman roads and how cool they are and how long Roman roads have lasted. If you look at other civilizations too, for example, you look at various like Chinese emperors or probably in India and other big civilizations, this idea of the standardization of weights and measures becomes a big deal because it's no longer these little disconnected markets where you have to have the inefficiency of somebody changing different currencies or adjusting weights or doing all these complicated operations. If you have standardized weights and measures, what that means is that you have this larger global marketplace open to you. So now, of course, in our digital age, we could look at tech as new as like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and all of this sort of stuff. What is that? It's kind of like a total standardization of like a monetary store, money, totally quantified. Likewise, if we look at other internet technology, I don't want to get too technical here because not everybody that listens to this is like a web programmer or whatever. But like all the internet sites, you go through Google, you go to websites, you go through, you're using the same information protocols, whether that's HTTP or something else. The rules by which digital information is sent, it's pretty much standardized into a handful of major protocols. So what started out as weights, measures, and the planning of roads, then we could see how it's also taken shape on the information superhighway. The information superhighway is just like the weights, measures, and roads that were standardized before. Might get mentioned, but yeah, we could see how, like, if you're connecting railroads, for instance, if the railroad cars are different widths, then that will cause some obvious trouble because every time you would have to like transfer stuff from one train to another, things like that. That's a big slowdown, a bottleneck of efficiency, whatever you want to call that. So it would make sense for things to be standardized. Okay, let's continue. Intellectual activity, the same effort was evident, particularly in the creation of an intellectual technique for history and biology. Ooh, now we're getting spicy and controversial here. The principles established by Descartes were applied and resulted not only in a philosophy, but in an intellectual technique. These phenomena are so far from being sources of energy that it can scarcely be maintained that mechanical transformation brought about all the rest. In fact, the widespread mechanical development spurred by the exploitation of energy came after most of these other techniques. It would almost seem that the order was reversed, that the appearance of these other techniques was necessary to the evolution of the machine, which certainly had no greater influence on society than, say, the organization of the police. Alright, not obvious to me how this has to do with Descartes, history, and biology yet, but let's scroll down a bit. The revolution resulted not from the exploitation of coal, but rather from a change of attitude on the part of the whole civilization. Here we are faced with the most difficult question. Why, after such slow progress, for centuries did such an eruption of technical progress take place? In a century and a half, why at a certain moment in history did something become possible which had not seemed possible? We must confess that the ultimate reason escapes us. Why did the invention suddenly burst forth in the second half of the 18th century? We cannot say. Here we are at the center of the mystery of invention, which strangely came to life for this brief moment. Okay, so Jacques Ellul is saying that this industrial revolution period was, to him, a very strangely, maybe you could say, catastrophic or like very violent, fast, something about like big things happened during this period. Alright, the inventions of the 19th century are much more easily explained. A kind of chain reaction was set up. The discoveries made at the beginning of the century generated those that followed. There was a logical and foreseeable succession of events once the first steps had been taken. But why were the first steps taken? We will never know, and in any case, that is not the purpose of this investigation. Okay, so I think what he's saying that we don't know, the section before this current one that we're looking at, the Industrial Revolution, I think was the 16th century, the so-called Age of Exploration, where people are going around on ships and things like that, compass, gunpowder, things like that, but not yet huge machines everywhere. So how did that lead into what we're calling the Industrial Revolution? Jacques Ellul does not provide a clear answer. I will leave it as an exercise to the viewers of this stream to provide their own answers to that if they wish. And it's not going to be like there's just one answer that's the best answer, but rather we could try to understand the developments that took place. And it could be different from place to place, of course, that led to these things. All right, so let's see where we are. Okay, why were these first steps taken? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, now he's going to offer some general answers. Let's hear what these are. There are a number of general answers. One can relate everything to scientific progress. For example, the 18th and 19th century saw advances in application, not in pure knowledge or in speculation. It is useless to recount the scientific evolution of this period or to enumerate the sensational series of principles and laws formulated and applied at this time. Okay, so people using scientific methods. I wouldn't say the scientific method specifically, but developing and formulating bodies of knowledge. Okay, we got a mention of cybernetics here. Got this line: applications may be made out of simple curiosity, as among the Greeks, or among the makers of automatons in the 18th century. These automatons were not without experimental value. Research in cybernetics today likewise ends in the making of automatons. So, in this section, the Industrial Revolution, we start to see the discussion of automatons, like self-moving machines of some kind, rather than having to have like humans sit there and input and supervise the machine. Rather, you have machines that kind of take on a life of their own. All right. Big claim in the next paragraph: the close link between scientific research and technical invention appears to be a new factor in the 19th century. According to Mumford, the principal initiatives came not from the inventor or engineer, but from the scientists who established the general law. The scientists took cognizance both of the new raw materials which were available and of the new human needs which had to be met. Then he deliberately oriented his research towards a scientific discovery that could be applied technically, and he did this either out of simple curiosity or because of definite commercial and industrial demands. Pasteur, for example, was encouraged in his bacteriological research by wine producers and silkworm growers. I remember reading, so I mentioned this Elon Musk book, Elon Musk biography. So I read this book, and say what you want about Elon Musk. This book did get me a little bit hyped. And one of the interesting topics of this book was drawing this distinction between doing science, as in finding stuff out, and engineering, which was like applying the science to building stuff. So of these two professions, whatever you want to call them, paths, then somebody like Elon Musk would be put on the side of the doer rather than the discoverer, because like as a business person or as an engineer, he would make use of like known techniques. So someone has some idea about batteries or rock jet propulsion, something like that, then it wasn't his job to sort of do the long, slow scientific work of finding out the specifics, the exacts of such a thing. Rather, his role would be to use knowledge or theories that have already been formulated, things that are already given, and then to work from this series of stuff that is given in order to engineer new solutions. So put existing knowledge and things together into new combinations, as opposed to making new building blocks itself. So like maybe a software equivalent would be like you have academic people who are trying to make their own programming languages, like push the graphics cards to their limits and so on and so forth. And then you have the software engineer people who they are not pushing the cutting edge by working on those very specific components and things, but instead they are getting skilled at putting together already existing things into useful combinations and becoming more efficient at their craft, which is being able to fit those things together in a timely and efficient manner. So Elon, I would put him on the engineer side. I think that he would call himself that, as opposed to the sort of pure scientist side. So yeah, going back to this paragraph here, when there is a close link between scientific research, so finding out those useful bits of information, those useful theories, and then the technical applications of them, then I think when you get these two things put together, then that's when you'll get the appearance, or I won't even say appearance, you'll get a lot of technological development. You'll get a lot of things changing really fast. So of course, like once we have widely available electricity, then you could start to get all these machines that rely on electricity. Like nowadays, you could buy so many power tools that run with electricity, and we have like small motors that could do all sorts of stuff. So you have the theory, the science that goes into saying how does electricity work, what do we do with it, and then if you have quickly the engineering that could apply that knowledge into making something useful, then you get a really big transformation of new stuff being developed. So I think this observation here by Ellul, that could explain how during certain periods we'll see a much more widespread or quick or dramatic changes with the intersection of scientific research and technologies as opposed to others. All right, we continue. In the 20th century, this relationship between scientific research and technical invention resulted in the enslavement of science to technique. In the 19th century, however, science was still the determining cause of technical progress. The society of the 18th century was not yet mature enough to allow the systematic development of inventions. As Siegfried Giedion says, the France of that period was a testing ground. Ideas proliferated, but could take no final form until society had undergone a transformation. What distinguishes the 18th century is the applications were made for reasons of utility. Soon, the only justifications of science was applicability. Most historians of technique content themselves with invoking philosophy to explain this. So he's making claims about how the different centuries differed in the relationship between the scientific knowledge and the practical techniques that arose out of it. The philosophy of the 18th century did indeed favor technical applications. It was naturalistic and sought not only to know but also to exploit nature. It was utilitarian and pragmatic. It concerned itself with easing human life, with bringing more pleasure into it and simplifying its labor. For the 18th century, man's life was narrowly confined to the material. It seemed evident that the problem of life would be resolved when men were able to work less while consuming more. The goal of science thus appeared to be fixed by philosophy. And then the philosophy was concrete. It was bound up with material results. What cannot be seen cannot be judged, and this explains this century's judgment of history, that the foundation of civilization is technique, not philosophy or religion. Alright, I think I'm going to pause here, and maybe we could stop reading Jacques Ellul today here, because I think we have a very interesting point here that might be relevant. Well, it is relevant to everybody here, so I'll just bring up a term. So have you all heard this term, first world problems? Something like this. So there's probably there's a Wikipedia, and then let's look at Know Your Meme, a reliable source of information. First world problems. What are these? So, first world problems, also known as, quote, white wine. Wine, not like the drink, but wine and complain, are frustrations and complaints that are only experienced by privileged individuals in wealthy countries. It is typically used as a tongue-in-cheek comedic device to make light of trivial inconveniences. And we'll look at the Wikipedia here. First world problems is an informal term for the issues in first world nations that are complained about in response to the perceived absence of more pressing concerns. Although it has been described as a, quote, a subset of the fallacy of relative privation, the term is also used by many people to acknowledge their gratefulness for not having worse problems and recognize their problems in a global context. The term has been used to minimize complaints about trivial issues and shame the complainer, to generate humor at the expense of first world culture, and as good-humored self-deprecation. So maybe you're like, oh, I have this job and this job pays more, but I don't want to, you have some complaint of something that is causing you distress. Then somebody might say, oh, ha, 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 like first world problems, implying that a more urgent problem would be like you're literally starving, you don't have enough food to stay alive. Maybe the next day you aren't sure. Maybe you're like, I don't know what TV show I want to watch. I'm bored. And it's like, well, you live in a gated suburb. The first world problems. Okay, so why is the idea of first world problems relevant here? I think that this whole idea of first world problems that we see here is, you could say it's a philosophical or a religious problem. And it has to do with, how does someone define, like, why are you living your life? What is your life for? So here in this paragraph of Jacques Ellul, we had this revealing line. So quote, "It seemed evident that the problem of life would be resolved when men were able to work less while consuming more. The goal of science thus appeared to be fixed by philosophy. The philosophy was concrete. It was bound up with the material results. What cannot be seen cannot be judged, and this explains this century's judgment of history, that the foundations of civilization is technique, not philosophy or religion." Right, so in the West, what we've seen is the development of lots and lots of technique that have led to a lot of efficiency in many ways. And we could see like an abundance of food, for example. So while it might be true, many people are able to work less and consume more than in previous eras in this sense. Like, you're having people that are doing a lot less physical work. Like, we have tons and tons of people that work office jobs, right? Or that have the air conditioner running while they work. You would say these are kind of comfy first world sorts of jobs. And then meanwhile, people are able to consume more. So we could just look at this in terms of consuming more food, consuming more entertainment, like these sorts of things. So clearly we could say, compare like a first world person to like a person in the Wild West in California, one of these early pioneer types, then yes, people are working less and consuming more in the terms of work as in physical labor, and they're consuming more in terms of they could eat more calories. Let's just use those two metrics. Now, does that mean that the modern person's life is better than the person before? So what we see here is a kind of playing out of exactly what we bargained for with the technology, right? So if what you're trying to optimize for is more output, like let's get a machine that is better at getting more grain or whatever it is that the machine does, then truly you might be able to get a society in which people are putting in less physical labor in terms of like muscle, sweat, and all that. And you might get more grain out of it. So let us even suppose that you succeed in that endeavor, which I think it's safe to say that people have succeeded in that endeavor in many ways. Then what problems are you left with at the end of the day? Well, a lot of these so-called first world problems, it's not like, oh yeah, you have all of the stuff that you could consume, so you should be happy. Well, I think we could all agree here that life isn't just about like eating as many cheeseburgers as you can, right? There's more to life than just eating as many cheeseburgers as you can. So likewise in our society, as we see people are working less physically, then what is it that people have to do like after work? Like a lot of the time, a lot of people, especially if they want to be in good health, stuff like that, they'll go to the gym, they'll work out. So they'll spend their whole day like looking at stuff. Maybe they don't even think it's very, very interesting or fulfilling to do some sort of work. And then after that job, then they have to do some sort of physical work like at the gym that doesn't directly actually solve anything in the same way that like working in a field by applying your muscles, you're actually working the earth and accomplishing work directly in a sense. Whereas if you go to the gym, it's indirect and you're doing what you're doing in order to maintain your health or to get stronger, something like that. But just lifting a weight up and down, it's not accomplishing something in the same way. In fact, you're emitting carbon by exhaling. You're being a carbon emitter. Right, and then likewise with the production and food, we could look too at all the sicknesses and stuff that are a part of modern society. So if you say, oh yeah, the good life is less work and more abundance, so we could consume more. Well, then, just look at the modern world today. I don't have to tell you all about the rise of diseases like obesity, diabetes, all this stuff. I don't have to tell you about that because it's pretty evident that a lot of these, you could call them diseases of excess sort of thing, have arisen. And I'm not gonna. I think it's wrong. It's not a correct reading to just say like, oh yeah, well, modern people are lazy, or like modern people, they don't work hard enough, something like that. I think one of the insights of looking at a work like Jacques Ellul work here too, it's like what we're doing right now is we're looking at society has transformed in these ways based off some like a philosophical underpinning, like the one that's expressly laid out here. Man's life was narrowly confined to the material. It seemed evidence that the problem of life would be resolved when men were able to work less while consuming more. So what happens when you look at man's life being narrowly confined to the material and you give people an opportunity to work less and consume more? What is a consequence that follows that? And by studying history, looking at what has happened, then you could come to have a better understanding of that. And then maybe something like first world problems, it's not so much as like a self-deprecating sort of those aren't real problems kind of analysis, but more we could say, what is first world problems? Well, we were able to get to the stage where we could have something like quote unquote first world problems because people chose to focus on and develop and bring about these technologies in a particular way, such that you could have a society where maybe one of the big problems of our current age is that like now you have a lot of people that want to go out and do stuff like homesteading. So I'm going to search homesteading right now, and then we could see on Google we got 13 million views, and if I search on images, probably see all these nice images. So a lot of people are like looking and saying, wouldn't it be nice if I could just live in a cabin, have some chickens, grow my own garden, and more chilling with chickens, just raise a family. It might be a lot of work, but hey, that actually sounds much nicer than this abstract system of working a job, making money with a 9 to 5, and maybe some mandatory overtime thrown in, going to meetings that I hate, and so on and so forth. There's like a kind of throwback where people are wanting a sort of, you could call it a more traditional lifestyle. And why might that be? I think one answer is to say because people have seen the consequences of holding an assumption such as less work as in physical input and more output and consumption is good. Maybe it's what we actually need to cure sickness of a lot of modern people in terms of like our bodies and our health is actually to do more work in terms of like more physical type work and to consume less, right? That's why like dieting or whatever is such a big topic, and how a lot of people are trying a lot of different things with respect to nutrition and that sort of thing. All right, so I think that's a good stopping point for the stream. Thanks everybody who stopped in to join, and I think next stream we could continue to read more Jacques Ellul, looking more at the philosophical notions behind the Industrial Revolution and how this technological society stuff takes us into the modern times. Looks like there's still a bunch of pages left for this section, so I'll plan on going through that, skipping over what doesn't seem relevant at all, and continuing the discussion about points that I think are relevant for us to discuss. Of course, if anyone's following along with the text or has a specific question, please do leave your feedback. Otherwise, I'll be happy to continue the show as we've been doing. Thank you all very much for those who have joined, and I hope to see you in the comment section. Leave a like, even leave a dislike, even if it's not visible how many dislikes there are for this stream. I'd be curious to see. Thank you all for joining.